Hello, everybody. My name is Samia. I'm with New Mexico Women's March. Today, we have some amazing women running for state senate. I have with me Siah Correa Hemphill. Did I say it right? Oh, you're mute. You're on mute.
Yes, Siah, Correa, Hemphill. Thank you.
Thank you so
got it
much.
right.
And Miss Neomi Martinez-Parra.
Yes, hello everyone.
Hi, so wonderful. And joining me as well as Lisa Padilla from New Mexico Women's March. We're here to celebrate and uplift all the beautiful women running for office. It takes courage, it takes a lot of persistence, and quite frankly, it takes a mission-driven woman to run in this pandemic. So I'd like each one of you to kind of tell us a little bit about herself. First off, kind of an intro to yourself. Maybe with the framework of how you introduce yourself in a pandemic, because we all reintroduce ourselves in different times, right? So please take it over, Siah.
Thank you so much. I'm Siah Correa Hemphill. I'm running for state senate in District 28 in New Mexico. And District 28 includes Grant County, Catron County, and most of Socorro County. I was inspired to run because of my son, Nicholas, who was born with a rare genetic syndrome. He was diagnosed with multiple disabilities, including bone cancer when he was just 4 years old. He had to have a left leg amputation, a year of chemotherapy, and he's had many medical challenges over the course of his lifetime. And I know how difficult it is to navigate our healthcare system, all the limitations, particularly living in a rural community. I'm also an educator and was inspired to pursue a career in special education after Nicholas was born. I started out as a kindergarten teacher in 1994 and then got my master's in school psychology so that I could be an advocate for children with disabilities. And for me, we've also been small business owners, and I know that it's all connected. If we can help support our families, if we can focus on family-friendly policies, if we can help our families and mothers be successful and be productive citizens with flexibility, with paid family medical leave, with maternity care, with good child care, then they're able to have more money that goes into our community, that helps our small businesses, and we have that cycle of prosperity that keeps our small communities thriving. And then we have more tax revenue, and then we're able to invest more in education. So when we see the kind of income inequality that we're experiencing today, the money that's concentrated at the top, that's money that gets invested in overseas markets. We never get the benefit of that revenue. So we need to have a fair tax system that benefits everyone, not just the wealthiest people in our communities. And when we're lifting up our families and the middle class and the poor and providing quality education and job training opportunities, then they're the ones who really feed the economy. And then we're able to all benefit because we're all in this together.
Yes, we are. Thank you so much. Neomi, please take it over.
Hi everyone, my name is Neomi Martinez-Parra, and sorry about the sunglasses, but it's pretty sunny out here. I had to pull over at the rest area. I hope that's okay, but I'll make it really quick. I decided to run because living in rural New Mexico, we were left behind. I wanted to see more funding in education and taking care of our elderly. We just didn't have the support out there. And so I made the decision that I was going to run because I want to see New Mexico thrive. I want to see our families, our kids, and our economy. Our economy is suffering. We need jobs out here. Rural New Mexico is very different from the I-10 corridor all the way up to even El Paso, where it's booming and it's just lots of it's just growing beautifully. But down here in rural New Mexico in District 35, which is Hidalgo County, Luna County, and then we have Doña Ana County, and we have Sierra County also. And so this district is the poorest in New Mexico. In Luna County, we have almost up to 17% unemployment. And we have the highest in Hidalgo County for suicide. So we really need support. And for the longest time, we were not being recognized, and we have been left behind. So that is one of the main reasons why I decided to run for Senate. And I am happy that, we ran in the primary, and yes, we won. It was a tough race, I will say that. And now we're in for the general, and we have a tough road ahead of us, but I have faith. All I have to do is listen to the voters who say we want change, we want New Mexico to thrive, and we want better climate. Let's look at the climate, and this is real. Climate change is real. And so at some point, I'd like us to start moving slowly into, away from oil and gas, but I know it's going to take time, and I'm realistic about that. So this is why I'm running. Again, for families, for our kids, and just a better life out here in New Mexico. And I'm so honored to, have this Zoom meeting with all of you, and my sister, Siah, and Pam. We're going to do this. We're going to win. And thank you so much for holding this meeting and just providing an environment where we can thrive and we can get closer together, and we're going to be stronger together.
Absolutely.
So thank you, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you. That's beautiful. I'm the mother of 9 kids, all right? I'm a grandmother to 5. But I'm still on the streets fighting. Every day we take to the streets. We don't shy away from demanding our rights as women, as mothers, as daughters, as community activists, as business owners, as teachers. You're all educators. It's amazing what you'll bring to the state Senate. If you could talk a little about what your wishes are, perhaps, if you, God willing, you do win and you get to represent us and represent your communities. What's at the top of your list in addressing some of the education issues? I know different parts of the state suffer greatly. So if you can address that, Siah, please.
Sure, thank you for that question. I decided to run, actually. Howie Morales, our state senator at the time, he came to speak to us at Aldo Leopold Charter School. I was the special ed director and also wearing the school psychology hat. And every single day I told him, there's a line of students outside my office door who are in emotional crisis. We have children who are self-harming, who are crying out for help. When are we going to get more mental health support in our communities, in our schools? Back in 2008, when we had the last recession, education was drastically cut, the budget for education. And so what happened was a lot of teachers were let go. If a teacher or other educator or ancillary provider retired, that position was not filled. Our classroom sizes just started to grow, and caseloads started to double, triple in some cases. It was so manageable when I first started and very rewarding place to be. And after 2008, it became a very demoralizing place because we were just giving the illusion of services. We were spread so thin and we were all so stressed out. We weren't able to provide the same quality of support that we had been prior. And so I was asking Howie how we can prioritize mental health, because I saw the need and I knew we still had not recovered from the last recession. We have not rebuilt our mental health infrastructure in our communities. And he said, you should run for state Senate. And I'm like, oh, brother, or submit your name for the appointment, because he had just been elected lieutenant governor, and that was going to leave his state Senate seat vacant. So I did submit my name. and there was a grassroots effort to encourage me to run for the seat. I didn't get the appointment, but the community was encouraging me to run. And so ultimately I decided to run, even though I had initially no life plan of being in politics, because I knew that it was a blood sport and that's not really, you know, my personality. But I knew that children need a voice, families need a voice, women need a voice. And at the time, I think our state Senate was like 10% women. And nothing could get through the Senate because it was so conservative. And I knew if we want to make an impact in New Mexico, if we want to improve our education system, if we want to improve child well-being, we were seeing horrific child murders across the state and horrific child abuse cases. That was just, you know, it hurt my heart. And I knew we could do better. Yeah. And so my priority in education is to, especially as we recover from COVID-19, is to prioritize mental health support, make sure we have the school psychologists, make sure we have the social workers, the school counselors to be able to help transition kids back into the school once it's safe to do so. And also with the focus on bilingual and bicultural education, make sure our curriculum is applicable to New Mexico. We have such a rich history here in New Mexico, and we need to make sure that we are using culturally sensitive curriculum to make it relevant to our children so that they can learn about the rich history of our state. My ancestor was Nino Terra Warren. She led the suffrage movement in New Mexico and was the first Latina to run for Congress in 1922. And she lost her election because of a big scandal. It was discovered that she was actually divorced and she was a widow. So misogynies, you know, was definitely rapid back then. And when she lost that election, she decided to run for Santa Fe Superintendent of Instruction. She won that election. She fought for bilingual and bicultural education. She fixed dilapidated school buildings. She got better teacher pay. And I want to continue her legacy.
Well, God bless. What a good legacy to come from.
I didn't know that that was where you came from, Siah. That's so cool. Oh my gosh.
Yes, and I only discovered that when Aldo Leopold asked me to speak in February because it was the anniversary of the suffrage of the 19th Amendment in New Mexico. And so I was researching the history, the suffrage history in New Mexico, and came across the name Nino Terra Warren, who really led the way in New Mexico. He was recruited by Alice Paul. And I found an obituary from the Silver City Daily Press when she passed away in, I think it was 1965. And it had her listed as a descendant of somebody who I recognized in my family tree. And so I looked it up and I was able to find her on my family tree. And that was just such an exciting discovery.
Oh, beautiful.
She was actually my great-grandmother's second cousin.
Oh my gosh.
Badass roots, my gosh.
That's really cool.
Feminist to the core. Wow, God bless.
What a legacy.
Wow, what a legacy. Naomi, what's your legacy? You're making your legacy. Is she able to? I wonder if she's able to answer.
I'm here. I'm so sorry. I had to get back on the road.
Take your time. You take your time.
Thank you for that. Okay. So that is so rewarding, Siah. I did not know that. I have to tell you that this year, my daughter had to pick somebody that she adored in New Mexico, absolutely adore, and why. And we picked her. We picked Nina. So it was amazing. And we talked about her, and she was on our list. So I just wanted to say that. That is
very
incredible.
Cool. We'll have to meet someday.
Yeah. Yes. So one of the things I tell the story of, growing up in poverty. My parents only had an elementary education. And, you know, it was hard to hear later on in life. And then when I went through school, you know, I did not graduate from high school. I dropped out of high school, by the way. I'm a high school dropout. I love to tell my students that story.
That's amazing.
And she basically said, I'm going to put you to college, but you have to volunteer in my classroom. And so I enrolled myself in college. I did like a few semesters, and then I got my GED. And then it wasn't until I was volunteering in her classroom that I thought, I absolutely love this. And I'm pretty good at it. So I went into education, and I became pretty good at it. And I taught from early education, early elementary, all the way into high school. I saw a lot of needs in the classroom, in the kindergarten classroom, kindergarten through third grade. And the biggest one was nutrition. And that was pretty painful. And then being a special education teacher and sitting in those IEP meetings and hearing the heartbreak of parents and the needs for our students. I'm going to switch lanes. Hang on just a second. Okay. And by the time we got to the high school level, for the first time in my life, I had observed homelessness. And I absolutely lost it. And I thought, you know, we need to do better. And then I saw the testing, and it was ridiculous for special education, especially students who could not pass a standardized test. So then the battle began with public education department. And at the time, I was the vice chair of the state party, and we got to visit 33 counties with Congresswoman Deb Haaland now. And, you know, she just, not just in education, but how when we have a good education, when we educate and fund our children at the elementary level, at the even 0 to 4-year-olds in early childhood, that when we do that, we become stronger. And our kids have a better education all the way into high school and in a strong workforce. And so that is my fight. In education, that's my fight, to support the land grant permanent fund, to tap into that, because I think we need good funding.
So that was
it's the kind of expenditure that tends to pay off, because if we have a strong educational system, then businesses want to move here. You know, we cut ourselves off at the feet without spending that infrastructure money, you know.
I think a lot of times it's done on by design.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, there's not an investment in the people, in the workforce. You know, your stories are so inspiring. It's so wonderful to hear women running that have actually stories that relate to all of us. You're part of the community, basically. You're products of the community. And I could sense that. That's wonderful. You talked about the land trust. You're going to tap into it. You promised, Naomi. Those kids need it, and I'm sure Siah is going to fight that fight. You touched on the poverty, both of you, and drug addiction, mental health, the need for mental health. Drug addiction may not be in the school, some in the school, but the poverty rate in New Mexico is just outstanding. I'm part of the Poor People's Campaign, and I had the breakdown, and they have a different breakdown than different numbers than the rest of a lot of studies. And it shows 77% of households in New Mexico are run by women, and the majority are poor. And I want to know if you could touch on how did you see that in your classrooms? If you could touch on that a little. And in your communities, what would you do differently to help women in mental health and in the workspace? Like, well, how could you help them increase their economics and socioeconomic statuses?
That's a great question and so important and relevant right now. So as a school psychologist, I've really focused on the mental health support in the schools, and I would try to provide resources to parents, like parenting skills and things, so that they could connect with their children in helpful ways and learn discipline techniques that are teaching self-regulation skills instead of just punitive ways. And I always wondered, like, how come this doesn't stick? I don't see that it's making the progress that I hoped. And then I realized that unless people's basic needs are met, when people are living in poverty and they don't have access to affordable housing, and they don't have transportation, and they don't have fresh food, and in some cases running water. I knew a family who was literally squatting in an abandoned house. Now, if I'm talking about trauma-informed therapy or trauma-informed practices or trauma-informed parenting techniques, but the parents are struggling to just provide a roof over their child's head or just figure out how they're going to feed their family, they're too stressed to be able to respond to their children in helpful ways. And then we see this lack of connection and bonding because when you have stressed parents, and a stressed parent is going to raise a stressed child. And when you're stressed and your brain is flooded with cortisol, that negatively impacts learning and memory. So those kids are coming to school not only possibly with dirty clothes, unfed, having their routines disrupted because there's no consistency or stability, but they're also stressed because of the lifestyle that they're living, and they're not going to make academic progress. And so if they go to school and then teachers are punishing them for not making the kind of progress that the teacher's feeling pressured, because that's the teacher's requirement. If you don't get all your kids at X place by this date, then we're going to come after you and you're getting a bad evaluation. You know, everyone is under so much pressure. And if you don't address those root causes or find out what services and supports might be missing in that child's life, we're never going to make progress. So we have to make sure that families have access to medical care, to mental health care, to dental care, that they have access to high quality food, to safe water, affordable housing, transportation to get to those resources. And then we can focus on academics. And then they're in a mental place where they can raise their children in a really healthy way. And so my goal is to work with our communities to make sure that our families have access to those essential services, those basic services, so truly we can make a difference in child well-being and education.
Thank you. No doubtedly, it's even more complicated with the COVID-19. God knows what schools and families are going to look like post this pandemic. Neomi?
Give me 1 second. I'm going to pull over because I really want to answer this question without any disruption, because that is an amazing question. And I'm going to just spear off a little bit about what Siah said about, you know, stress situations. Give me 2 seconds. There I am. So I know that many of you know that I have an adopted, beautiful 10-year-old daughter. But when she was 2, by the time she was 2, she had already been in 5 adoption homes. She was in 3, not adoptions homes, sorry, foster homes, in 3, and then in 2 group homes by the time we were able to become her parents when we brought her in. And one of the things I remember is that she was always eating with her hands. You know how we would eat with, with silverware. She would take the food and put her entire hand in her mouth and just shovel it as fast as she could. And the psychologist told us, that is a sign right there. These children are suffering. There's some trauma there. And they're worried that they're not going to get their next meal. And so, we had to just love and love and love her and provide lots of resources for her so that she could see that she was never going to be without again. And there were times that she would just show signs of trauma. And the one thing she said, and Siah said this, structure with consistency. And I recall the psychologist saying, if you give her consistency every single day, she's going to develop, because that is the root right there. Kids develop when they have consistency. Wow. So I was devastated when they told me I had to put her into school, preschool at 2. And I thought, no, she needs me. She needs me. And they said, no, she needs a routine. And so we put her in, and it was only 3 hours a day. And trust me, I waited outside that door for 3 hours and then went and caught her after the 3rd hour. But we did that, my husband and I, every single day. And I look at her now, and she is the most consistent individual that I've ever met. She is the love of my life. And leadership, I'm going to go back to, this is what it takes. It takes strong leadership, good resources. So having this experience in the classroom, making sure I had good leadership and strong resources when I would look at my students, and any sign that I could recall from the psychologist teaching me was an immediate call to my supervisor or to my principal. And I was able to pick up on these clues. So I get that. And so again, what could I do? And this I do know, that there is a deep correlation between poverty and education.
Yes.
Yes. The more education you have, the less likely you will be in poverty. And the same goes for the reverse. And I learned that through dropping out of high school and going into college and teaching my students this. So educating my parents was very powerful. But most important, listening to them. I would have never learned about one of my students being homeless had it not been for the mother opening up, and had it not been for her trusting me. But it was a psychologist who gave me the language on how to speak to her. And we were able to work it out. Eventually they became consistent with a good home, and he's off to college. So that's a good thing. But I wanted to just pull over and make sure I got the story out. So that's what I would do. Just educate my parents and look for strong leadership, because it's strong leadership. If you show me a strong community, I'll show you a strong leader. Show me a strong leader, I'll show you a strong community. They go hand in hand.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You touched on homelessness in high school, in schools, but I know I read some numbers that were startling to me. 2 years ago, the numbers were 9,000 homeless high.
Did you hit mute?
Yeah, because I can't hear you, Samia. Nope, still can't hear
Sorry
you.
about that. Sorry about that. Where did I cut off?
You're talking about high school?
High school homelessness.
Yeah.
I was shocked at some numbers that I received 2 years ago. Santa Fe high schools have over 9,000 homeless high schoolers. I couldn't believe it. Albuquerque has 11,000 homeless high schoolers. I don't know your neck of the wood what the numbers are. I couldn't believe it till one day my kids, one of my high school, I live in the Northeast Heights in Albuquerque, and my son said, we have to do a school project. You have to drop me off to some of my, my team. And I go, okay, where am I dropping you off? And he tells me, Howard Johnson off of the highway. And I said, well, I'm not taking you to Howard Johnson. It's my 15-year-old. He says, Mom, They're homeless. They just get sometimes tickets or they get funding and they stay there temporarily. And I went there, I'll be darned. It was packed with high schoolers. This is a serious problem we have, and nobody talks about it. Nobody talks about it. So I wonder if that's an issue in your neck of the woods. And then I want to touch on racism, misogyny. We live in the big cities. I want to see your story, what it looks like to you, Siah, and to you, Neomi. What does patriarchy and misogyny looks like in your neck of the wood? What is racism in the age of the streets saying Black Lives Matter? How is the activism in your community? So it's a loaded 3 questions.
So first question is homelessness. So I don't know those statistics off the top of my head, but that's an important thing that I want to research. So I'm going to write that down. And I know that, you know, we were talking about the impacts of not having those basic needs met, and having a home provides that security, provides that consistency like Naomi's talking about. And when you don't have that home base, that's, you know, very disruptive to a child's well-being when they don't have a consistent place to go after school. So some of the children that I've worked with who are homeless, some of the ways that that interferes with their ability to get a quality education, and this is, I'm talking pre-COVID here, COVID has only exacerbated the challenges that that poses, but they're not going to be able to get their homework completed because that's the last thing on their mind is completing homework or doing an academic task. They're worried about, where am I going to sleep tonight? Am I going to have some clean clothes tonight? Am I going to be able to have dinner tonight? And how am I going to get to wherever I'm staying and get back to school? And that keeps you from being able to access your frontal lobe. So we have our frontal lobe where problem solving occurs, where we can choose how to respond, where we can set a goal, where we can achieve a goal, where we can stay organized. And if we don't have those basic needs met, housing being one of them, then that puts us into survival state. And we all know what that looks like. When we're in survival state, we have limited skill set to solve problems. It's fight, flight, or surrender. And so we need to make sure that our communities have those access to those essential services. Otherwise, you end up with a violent society. And then that's how you get this marginalization and racism and all of these things. When you keep people oppressed, whether it's women oppressed or people of color oppressed, and they're not able to access those essential services, those essential supports that you need to live with dignity, there's no other option than for them to find it in whatever way they can, because our instinct is to survive.
That's right.
And so we have to be able to provide those supports so that people can independently take care of themselves and to be able to independently contribute to their communities in a helpful way. But if you prevent that, and then to add insult to injury, to then condemn them for finding a voice and to speaking up for what they need, and to not listen to that or to criticize them and those groups that are trying to express their pain and the challenges that their communities are facing, you know, is just insulting. And so we need to listen to that. We need to listen to people who are saying that they want social justice, economic justice, and find ways of having those tough conversations instead of saying racism doesn't exist in the United States, which I've literally heard people say, like, yeah, it does. But if you're not living that experience, it might not be your reality. But if you lack empathy, the ability to see a situation from another person's point of view, then you're never going to acknowledge the struggles. And I think that's why it's so critical that people like me, people like Neomi, people like Pam, who have had significant challenges in our lives that we've overcome. I grew up in poverty. I didn't have health care. I needed glasses in the 6th grade, and my family couldn't pay for that. So I went from 6th grade until I was a senior, not being able to see the board. I couldn't see the board, which really impacted me in math. So I started just skipping math class because it was embarrassing, because our teacher would call on people randomly to solve problems on the board. And I was too embarrassed to say my family can't afford to pay for glasses. And when I did have the courage to talk to teachers about I can't see the board, their solution was, we'll sit in the front. Well, I still couldn't see the board. And it was too embarrassing for me to say, no, my eyes are so bad at this point that I still can't see the board. So I'm just going to skip school. But how many students are in that position where they have some lack of access to medical care or mental health care or dental care or transportation that's impacting their ability to access their curriculum that we don't even know about? And they may be too full of shame, because with poverty comes shame. And they're too full of that shame to be able to tell an adult what they need to be more successful. And I remember always being very hyper vigilant about when the school nurse was going to come and do vision and hearing checks because of that shame. So if I saw her going from class to class, I was sick and I'm out the door. I'm calling my mom, come and pick me up. And I wasn't, like, even though I was a teenager, my brain was not developed enough to realize that had I talked to an adult there, maybe they could have helped me find the resources. My only, I'm down here in fight or flight. Like, this is my brain that I talk to people, like, this is survival state down here. This is the emotional state, and this is your prefrontal lobe. And so if I'm down here in survival state, I'm going to flee. That's my only strategy. I cannot problem solve that situation. Think maybe if I tell someone, they'll help me. I'm full of shame and I want to flee. And so developing relationships with kids is so critically important, so they have a safe person and they know that you are going to be there without judgment. And when we have those relationships with children, they're going to feel more comfortable being able to express that. Not just comfortable, but they're going to be in a brain state that allows them to see you as a resource and a helper and feel more free to have those conversations. Thank you for that question.
Thank you. I know it was a loaded question. Naomi?
Yeah, that was. You might have to break it down again.
Should I break it down again? I think of, when I think of homelessness, it just came to mind because I remembered what happened. But I also know that misogyny and patriarchy play a role in how women's economic and schooling, it impacts it, and women's rights, and it also impacts the racial element. So go ahead, take whatever part you want, and we'll address the other issues.
Okay, well, good, thank you. Because there's a lot to that. Oh, sorry, hang on. There's a lot to that, I can say. My dad being from Mexico, I didn't know what racism was until I started to grow up, in my community. And my dad always had broken English, and he couldn't read or write. And he wrote very poorly, even in his own language. And he wrote and spoke very poorly he tried as much as he could in the English language, but was unsuccessful. And I remember being little and going around town with him, and people mocking him and making fun of him and just laughing at him. But it would just roll right off of him. And then when he eventually became a citizen and took me to vote with him, it was the most powerful feeling ever. But still, there was a lot of racism. But I didn't know what it was until much later on, until I became an adult and went into college. And I look at it now and I think, oh my gosh, that was uncalled for. That is unacceptable. And so looking at that and looking at poverty, I can see the correlation there. And it's very devastating. And when we talk about oppression, look at where, I just want you to look at where we are. In District 35 in southwestern New Mexico, where we had a senator for 32 years who oppressed us, who left us behind. That's oppression. I think that a senator, a representative, their job, they have an obligation and a commitment to take care of their constituents. That is their job. And so again, this is why I ran. This is why I stood up.
Good.
And it wasn't just for families. It was for individuals who didn't have families, for those individuals who still live on the street or who live in homes, in group homes, but they're registered to vote. Talking to voters for many days now, I've talked to a lot of independent voters who believe that they may not want to be affiliated with either party, but what they want is justice. What they want is equality. What they want is a voice. And again, I will do that. I will take our unheard voices to Santa Fe, and I will fight for Southern New Mexico, for our district. I'm not sure that's how you wanted me to answer, but I was thinking about all of this when Siah was talking. Like, yeah, that's right. That's right.
You both answered in your own way that question. And perhaps I can ask a more direct question. Can we all say Black Lives Matter? We're all mothers here. We happen to all be mothers. And we're women. To see George Floyd's murder, I think it's changed America forever. I mean, it has always happened, but that particular moment was a breaking point for all of us. Can you talk about how it will impact you as a leader? I mean, Neomi, you kind of touched on it, but if you could elaborate a little more on how you see yourself as a leader, taking that to the Capitol and working perhaps on legislation that might make a difference on that.
Sure, and I'm going to be making some oatmeal here for my son. So as a mother, we're all multitasking. But yes, I think it's so important to talk about that, because we see that the counter to that is no, all lives matter, or no, blue lives matter. And to that I say, this Black Lives Matter movement came about because in order to make racism work, we as human beings are not designed to own other humans, or to treat people terribly, or to abuse people. It's when a group of people is dehumanized that allows us to be able to treat them less than we would others. And so Black people have had we've dehumanized them. That was what happened to allow us to have slaves. And so the Black Lives Matter movement is a movement to rehumanize people who have been marginalized, and to bring awareness about the inequalities that have happened because of not being seen as being equal. And so I think it's incredibly important here in my community, we have Hurley and North Hurley. So, and this is where Salt of the Earth, where that story came from. You know, there was such racism here. So we had the Hispanic community in North Hurley. That's where my father grew up. Spanish was his first language. And there was a wall, there was a fence separating North Hurley and Hurley. So the white people lived in Hurley, and the Hispanics lived in North Hurley. And if you were going to go to the store was in Hurley, and you had to go through the fence, the wall, and there was a guard there with a gun, and they were going to ask you, what business do you have here? Well, I'm going to the store. Do you have money? Show me your money. You have 1 hour or I'm going to come and find you.
Oh my God.
So that was here in this community up until the 50s. And so that was the kind of life my father grew up in. And so there's still that racism in our community, and that feeling, people who live in the mining district, when they come to Silver City, where Hispanic people were not welcome, and there were signs in the window, no dogs and no Hispanics. And that wasn't that long ago. That was like 1 generation ago. And so there's still, people are still carrying that trauma. And so I think that when we can recognize what this movement is about, it's about to rehumanize, and it's about demanding equality and demanding social justice, and understanding the things that are the institutions in our community that contribute to that, to the injustices that we see. So with that, I will hand it over to Neomi.
Thank you. Naomi.
I just pulled up to my mom's house, so give me a couple of seconds to readjust.
Okay.
The question on, you know, on George Floyd, that is very painful. That was the hardest thing to watch, to see. Like, to this day, I didn't even see the full video because I couldn't. It was too painful. And, you know, I'm also the wife of a retired law enforcement officer. And when he saw that, he was just sick into his stomach. And like, that was absolute murder. That was horrific. And definitely a type of reform needs to occur. What would I take to Santa Fe? I would take the voices again and make sure that all voices are heard. I have a nephew who is African American, and he is the love of my life. I love him to death. And he was angry for the longest time and just pained by all of this. We have a very diverse family. We have Native Americans in our family. We have African American, Anglo. We're just very diverse. But the one thing I will take is to make sure all voices are heard, and that everybody gets a fair share to speak and to be treated equally. That's how I feel. This is a very touchy subject because, you know, we've seen it, we've lived it, we felt it. To hear the story of North and South, like Siah was talking about, I never knew that. I didn't even know that occurred, and it wasn't that long ago. We didn't go through any of that down here, but we're very close to our border wall. I got to see that last month. Like, I got to stand right there, and it was very devastating as well. But we definitely need to look at reform. And I'm not sure how to do that, but when we get to Santa Fe, collectively, I think we will all start moving forward.
Absolutely. Thank you. The injustices are so tremendous. I mean, the immigrant conditions there, the children, the family separations. We've seen so much in the last couple of years. So we're counting on leadership that is very moral and ethical and community informed. And I'm just really proud to see both of you so understanding of the needs of your community. We're going to talk about, sorry.
Wait, before we move on, Samia, can we
Sure.
talk a little bit about like the private detention centers at the border? I think that's really important because we just sort of started to talk about like the border wall and talk about the inordinate disparities and those kinds of things. And, you know, that forced sterilization that we found out about ICE, all of these things that sort of inordinately impact, especially women of color, the trans women of color who are in the detention centers. And I wondered if you'd heard from your constituents about what they think about people who are detained unfairly so that a private prison complex can profit from their victimization, you know.
I was about to ask about the private prisons and how and touch on all those subjects. Thank you for bringing that up.
Sure.
So there's just so much to address as far as morality, and you have a lot on your plate, but you have to set it straight from the beginning. So let's hear your voices on that.
Yeah, and that's such a heartbreaking situation there, and we're so close to what's happening, and it's just it's shocking that in this day and age we're seeing that kind of dehumanization of women, dehumanization of children, dehumanization of people from another country. And there are people in my community who feel like I do, that it's unjust and that we can do better. And that these are people who are fleeing violence and they're fleeing absolutely horrific situations and looking for a better way of life. And they have something valuable to contribute to our communities if we allow that. Mm-hmm. We can use them to help our economy and help us have a more diverse country and community, and to be able to celebrate these people who have so much to offer. But when we also have people who have never had challenges or who lack empathy or who have been taught to hate and dehumanize others and they're unconscious of that, those are the thought processes that allow you to see humans as needing to be in a prison where you can generate money, that's your goal. I want money. How can we have economic prosperity? We're going to build a prison and we're going to make money off of people's suffering. And that's my concern if more women aren't in public office, that the motivation of politicians becomes nothing more than profit.
Right.
And at the cost of tremendous human suffering. And so when we can highlight how much better off we all are, I'm convinced that the real difference in these two ways of thinking is if you believe that we're all connected. If I believe that your suffering hurts me, if there is one person suffering, we are all suffering. If I truly believe that, then I'm going to interact in my community a lot different than if I believe that I'm a silo. And if I harm you, that's too bad, because I'm going to benefit from, taking your resources. And I don't believe there's enough in the world, enough resources. So I'm going to hoard things for my own survival. So I think that it comes down to a different world view. If we believe that there's an abundance of resources, we live in the wealthiest country in the world, there's enough to go around. if we're motivated to help each other, just like Ruth Bader Ginsburg, you know, that was her mission in life, was to repair the tears in our society and to dedicate her life to seeking justice for all. And so that starts in the schools. When we have schools that are organized around, and there's a culture in the schools of a school family where we can all help each other and contribute to each other, and that every single student is valued and has an important job that they can do to contribute to the school family. You know, that's how you instill that belief when people are given that opportunity to have meaningful roles in society from very early on, and that's recognized and noticed, the contributions that you're made, not by here's a tangible reward, but by noticing, wow, Lisa, you spent this evening with us sharing your important ideas. That was so helpful. And you're releasing a little burst of oxytocin, and it feels good. And that's how we're really wired. We're wired to help each other. But if I'm too much in fear that there's not enough to go around, I will never have enough. I will just hoard and hoard and hoard, and I don't care about anybody else except myself, never seeing that negatively impacts you and it negatively impacts me. You can see the president, he does not look like a happy person. He does not have a happy marriage. If he was able, and I don't know if he's capable at this point, of caring about others and having empathy and trying to help the community and see how he can provide his own resources to help others, that would give him so much more fulfillment and love and joy, because what you offer to others, you strengthen in yourself.
Thank you. Naomi. Are you parked?
I just walked in my front door.
Oh,
So I was trying to get my laptop back up, but I can't get it in time, so I'm going to just stick with my phone. As far as private prisons and asylum seekers, that's a very good question, and I never really thought about it until we had, you know, the detention out here in Luna County, and talking to individuals out there who were taking food boxes and medical supplies.
Yes.
And I never had the opportunity to go out there because we were just so busy. Then COVID hit, but I was always on the phone with them. And there was even a couple out of Silver City, and they would drive all the way out there. And her name was Barbara Gay Butte, and she was very strong. She's a strong believer in taking care of others. But I think we need to, again, reform private prisons. I'm not a fan of that. I don't know how else we will do that, but when we get to Santa Fe, and not just when we get to Santa Fe, but every day in our communities, how we can look at that differently, because that's something that we absolutely need to address. And not only just having my husband as a retired law enforcement, but he's also retired Border Patrol agent. And so he saw some things that were very heartbreaking.
Yeah.
And within the scope of what he could do and what he couldn't do, or how he would address it, it was very touching to hear those stories. You know, asylum seekers, you know, deserve a voice. Just because they're others from other countries, what does that mean? You know, again, it's humanity out here. And I look at my father. He was in jail many times because he was trying to cross over to make a better life for all of us, even before we were here. My mother tells me the stories that she would go and visit him in jail, and they would let him see my oldest brother and sister when they were little. And she always tells those stories that it was devastating. There wasn't another way around it. And, you know, there needs to be a better way. that we can address this. Thank you for bringing that question.
You know, you're going to have to talk, we're probably a social justice community, we're going to bring it to your table. No more contracts for private prisons. We're going to talk about protecting prisoners, especially in this COVID-19. There's no protection, there's no testing, there's the cases are horrific. That's what I'm hearing from people from inside the prisons. So there's no protection for them. We complain about the borders. We don't want to obey international law. We don't understand refugees coming to the border. We violate the basic needs of humanity and families by separating. We sterilize women. Something's got to give. Just because law sometimes protects, because law is man-made, at the end of the day, our conscience and our morality has to overcome it. And that's what a democracy, you know, we have to, in a democracy, that's what we have to work for, right? God willing, we'll be able to approach all of you. I want to talk about now, because I know the time, it's okay if it's 6:10. Can we go on for another 10, 15 minutes? It's okay. HB 51. RBG passed away. God rest her soul. She did so much for us as women and for civil rights, and she will be missed greatly. But we also know we have to create the next generation of leaders that are going to take this on. In the immediate threat of, you can't hear me?
No, I was talking to Joe, the handyman.
Don't say that. Okay. I lost my train of thought. In the immediate threat of Roe, if we lose Roe, how are we going to work on HB 51? You're going to win. That's how. You're going to win. Talk to me a little about that.
Yeah, it's going to be so critically important, and it's such a concern right now. You know, abortion, these are decisions that need to be made by women and healthcare providers. And there's so much misinformation that's spread that creates a dangerous situation for a woman. It creates a dangerous situation for their healthcare provider. And it's so important that we have Neomi elected and Pam Cordova elected and me, so that we can fight to overturn that abortion ban in New Mexico, giving women the ability to make those decisions with their healthcare provider. And I don't know what else to say about it, then that's going to be critically important now that Roe versus Wade is going to be at risk of being overturned.
Your community supports it? What does the community look like in Silver City?
Yeah, there is a large group of, you know, I think it's a really high percentage of Catholics here. But I think that even within the Catholic community, there are women who see that the majority of the people here, I believe, see that as being something that women should make. There's so many variables. Each pregnancy looks different. And women, and Neomi has a beautiful story about this. And the majority of people in the community want to see women and healthcare providers make these decisions, because there's so many reasons that a woman might find herself in that position. And I think that when men especially have a really narrow view of who is seeking abortions, and it's because they were irresponsible, or they were a slut, you know, slut shaming and all of those things. If that is what you think of women, then you're going to feel like, no, as a moral authority, politicians should be making these decisions, not women. Women are not capable of making these decisions. If we leave it up to women, then they're going to be, you know, and I'm not even going to use such offensive terms, but the way that I have heard abortions that happen later in pregnancy described so horrifically incorrectly is such an insult to me as a mother and to women across New Mexico. So whatever we can do to help keep that safe and accessible to women, to save women's lives. I mean, we all know that if you criminalize abortion, that's not going to reduce abortions. That's going to reduce access to safe abortions. And we're going to basically criminalize women and healthcare providers, put them in prison so that we can make a profit off of them. And I can't think of anything more insulting or causing more trauma in our communities than allowing women to be criminalized for seeking an abortion.
It's very true. Naomi, please.
When Siah was speaking that, my husband just happened to walk by and he's like nodding his head and giving us a thumbs up because we both went through some very sad trauma. And I'll never forget that day when the doctor said, you know, Naomi, you can continue to try to get pregnant, but every time you do, you're going to end up having to abort your baby every time. And so I still remember being numb and leaving the doctor's office that day. And I still wanted to fall back and say, you know what, maybe it'll just work out. And depending on my faith and falling on my faith, but then listening to the words of my doctor and us sitting there and getting counsel. And I just remember being numb and not wanting to talk to anybody. But in the end, we listened to our doctor, and I thank God that I listened to my doctor, because I wouldn't be here today. It was a matter of life or death. But it's not just for you know, I'm not just speaking for myself. I'm speaking for all women who have that power. We are grown, strong women, and we are smart enough to make those decisions. And I am tired of my voice being taken away ever since I was a little girl. I've been a victim since I was a little girl, and I've had to take on giants my whole life, and I will do it again, and I will do it tomorrow. And women, we will continue to be strong. We will continue to stand together. And if this law gets reversed, guess what? We will run again, and we will run again, and we will speak up, and we will speak louder. And we have a constitution that says that we can protest, and we can do it again and again and again. We can file petitions, and we can get a petition going, and we can continue to do that. And I will continue to do that until our voices are heard, because women, we need to make those decisions for us and for our families, and whatever it is that we decide. I've met many women since I decided to run for Senate who have been abused, who have been raped, who got pregnant from being raped, and because whether it was their faith or whatever reason, they were still not allowed to have their voice heard.
Wow.
And so I stand with women, and we are all going to get stronger, and we're going to run again, and we're going to continue to fight. So this is an area that's very sensitive to me, and I'm very passionate about, because it's time. And you know, for the longest time, I didn't want to talk about my personal issue. And it wasn't even until I was on the radio that it just came out. And I was with my coach, Charles Goodmacher, and he just says, tell your story. Just tell your story. And I said, well, I kind of did with Emerge anyways. And he's like, no, tell the world your story. And it just came out of my mouth. And I thought, you know, men don't have what we have. They don't have our bodies. The makeup of our bodies is not the same. And no disrespect to anyone who's transgender or any of that. I have two beautiful nephews that are transgender, from women to men, because that is who they are. And they stand with me on this topic as well. and they may never have children either, but they're also adopted parents.
That's right.
And so, this is devastating if it gets reversed.
It is devastating, and we will fight the fight. We will not take it. We definitely will fight the fight.
I just want to thank you for sharing that, Naomi.
Yes.
It takes so much courage. And I think it's the kind of thing that if we shared our stories more, it would lose its stigma. And so I think it really starts with the leaders. So I appreciate you being such a powerful and strong leader.
Absolutely. Talk about saying your truth. Sometimes it's hard for me to say my truth because, I wear the hijab and there's a lot of strength. It gives cover in many different ways. So anytime I open up about pain and trauma, the vulnerabilities are very real. But, even though I'm the mother of 9, I've been married for 34 years, going on 35. There was, I think it was my fifth pregnancy actually, where I was pregnant with twins. And at 5.5 months, I lost them. It was a spontaneous abortion. The pain that I felt, the crying that I had for months, I'll never forget it. I'll never forget it. And to your point, women don't make decisions unless it's appropriate for them. They know the pain. These are not easy decisions, but we have the right to make the decisions we want. We have the right to organize our families, organize our body, organize our life. And it is we have to do what we have to do to empower ourselves. There's a lot more there. You opened up a little about yourself, and I usually don't talk, but I appreciate your voice, and I appreciate your voice, Siah. And we're going to come near the closing, but we talk about trauma. We talk a lot about a lot of heavy stuff. I can't even talk because it was just really emotional for me to listen to both of you. How do you find self-love? What do you do for yourself? For self-care?
Wow, that's a loaded question to
We
end.
never do that, right? Because we're always feeling, but
We're women.
It's really challenging.
What is that?
when I know, I'll let you know.
Well, I'll tell you what I did just recently that's been so helpful. It was a difficult primary. Naomi knows just how challenging it was to go against the incumbents, and nobody really thought we could do it. Naomi certainly had an even bigger battle with Goliath. And my battle, though, was with a career politician, and everyone in the community knew him. He was the youngest county clerk in New Mexico, so he had been involved in campaigning and running campaigns for a really long time. And so when I would call people and ask them for money, they'd kind of laugh like, oh, do you think you even have a shot at this? No credit whatsoever. And so it was so satisfying to not just win, but to win by a respectable margin. And just goes to show how important messaging is and to stay positive. But as difficult and challenging as the primary was, it's nothing compared to what is happening now, because there is so much division, and people who, because of social media and being able to hide behind an avatar, are incredibly hateful, and to be named called because of misinformation that's being spread can be really, really demoralizing. And so I was the social media expert. I was on there, I was commenting, I was replying to people until last week, and I couldn't. I didn't sleep for 3 nights because I was so upset about what I was seeing on social media, about the negative mailers that were being sent. And it was a roller coaster, because we would have this great response and we'd send it out there and we're yeah, take that, in your face misinformation. You think you can lie and denigrate women? And then he'd come back with an equally hateful message. And then all these women chiming in, just like you see at the national level. Yeah, she's a this and she's a that, and then being brought down again. And then my campaign manager hitting him again with something else. And anyway, it was just this roller coaster of stress hormones that I was experiencing, and I couldn't calm myself down. And so my campaign manager had a heart-to-heart with me, and she says, we still have a long way to go, and it's only going to get worse. You need to pull yourself together and figure out how you're going to manage this. Because if you haven't slept in 3 nights, like, this is not sustainable. And so I thought, I'm not getting on social media anymore. And my daughter, who's 27, was so excited to be able to help me with my social media account. So we hired her. She is now Siah for Senate. I do not get on Siah for Senate. So that is my self-care, like separating myself from social media, so I'm not tempted to read the comments, so I'm not the one deleting the hate and everything. And that has been incredibly freeing, but most importantly, it helps me focus on more important tasks like tending to my children and being more productive at work, instead of seeing a hateful comment and then having to do therapy with a student when I'm, you know, charged from what I just read about myself, being accused of defrauding the school system for taking unpaid family medical leave, and being a POS, and being a scam artist, and people saying, oh, she's lucky she didn't go to jail because I took unpaid family medical leave to care for a newborn and to care for my son who has one leg and it was broken. And that is the kind of lack of empathy that we will get if men like my opponent are elected into office. And so it makes it so much more personal for me, the fight that we're fighting. And yeah, so that's my self-care, is giving myself that time away from social media, spending time with, making sure that I prioritize time with my children and my husband, and making sure that I'm eating right and I'm exercising a little bit every day. And it's going to be a sprint from here to the finish line. And I also reach out to Neomi, I reach out to Pam, because I know that so much of what I'm experiencing, they're experiencing too. And there's a comfort in that. And there was a comfort in watching the documentary about Hillary Clinton, hearing how they talked about her appearance, what she was wearing, her hair, and I've gotten all of those comments, and shocking. You know?
It's a good thing your daughter took the
yes.
That's the best thing you could have ever done. By the way, my kids did that for me once. I was doing a campaign, and it was the best thing you could ever do.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, we only have 2 minutes. Naomi, you got it.
So during the primary, our campaign manager, he made a trip down here, of course, with mask and everything. And I'm not a big drinker, but he bought us like 10 cases of beer, all exported beer for my husband. And then my husband went and got into this wine club, and he just got tons of wine. We just were waiting for our next shipment. And so we just started incorporating cooking and a little bit of wine, and my husband drinks maybe a beer every night. And on the days that I'm not with my mom, and giving my daughter an hour with her just watching Disney Channel. And we started making tortillas. And I remember talking to you that day. And so we started learning how to make tortillas. And so we're just putting stuff in the home, just restructuring our home since the primary, just so I won't go crazy. And it's worked. And I hate social media. I hate to look at my Facebook because I don't even know what's going to be there or comments. And I already said, I don't want to see her page, my opponent's page. I don't want to know nothing. I just want to talk to voters about who I am and if they're going to vote for me. And so that's my escape. And it's been working.
And then meditation and prayer. I try to fast at least 3 to 4 days a week, and it just clears my mind. And so that's what I've been doing.
You know, that's the best medicine.
I'm so glad to hear that you all have a network of co-conspirators that you can kind of rely on to get you through those tough times. I hope that continues. I think you're muted, Samia.
Okay, there we go. New Mexico Women's March is proud to have had an hour and a half of real talk with the real women and leaders who are going to represent us well. You've got this. We're going to be rooting for you, and we will get out the vote for you. Thank you so much, ladies.
Thank you so much. For
Thank
your
you. Bye,
Absolutely
Siah.
amazing.
Bye.
Meet you both.
Yes.
Well, what'd you think? Oh, can you stop recording? You're muted. You're muted. Can you stop recording? Oh.